Hey everyone, so I'm going to be reading what I wrote regarding why so many minorities voted for Trump. Although I briefly brush over it, I don't feel like I go truly in depth in regards to that issue, given the fact that there's so many moving pieces when it concerns communities of color outside of the US. A lot of these communities, especially when, speaking about Latin America, uh, as a Latina myself, and I apologize for the noise in the background, but as a Latina myself, we all know that Latin America was colonized as well by the Spaniards, right? Conquistadors. So there is a lot of influence, a lot of the same influence that exists in the USA, and a lot of influence that exists in many European or colonized countries around the world. That is definitely a determining factor as to why a lot of individuals vote the way that they do and align heavily with colonization, with Eurocentrism. Something naturally I want to continue to tackle, continue to bring awareness of regarding that, because these locations, these places were originally inhabited. For example, I'm going to use Latin America as an example. Latin America was originally inhabited by indigenous communities. Naturally, due to colonization, a lot of those that have ancestry or align with whiteness exist within those very regions. Nonetheless, our communities spoke a different language, didn't speak Spanish, right? So it's sad to see that there is such a heavy desire and maybe this almost lack of awareness, I would say, because I do feel and I do believe that knowledge really equates power. Like, once you are informed about the history of your people, of where you come from, your heritage, your roots, I do believe that that dynamic can change, and understanding, okay, wow, like our communities within those regions were also oppressed by colonization, by the colonizer. Yeah, but there is also, I feel like, and I've had this conversation not with someone from Latin America, but more so with someone in North Africa, as I always had an interest and desire in learning the Arabic language. But I had this conversation with someone from the region, and I feel like this is also a heavy truth. And I apologize once again for the noise, but I feel like this is also a very the very reality of it. He said that in his country, in his community, like, one of the reasons why racism, colorism hasn't been tackled so heavily, or hasn't been addressed as much as it has more or less here in the West, is because they're dealing with other issues that don't allow them to necessarily now focus on that very issue that exists. There's a lot of social issues that exist already, but it's not at the very top. It's not a priority. And that was naturally his take on it, and I can say that is a very real thing. Like, when you're and not saying, and I don't like to put this narrative out there that other countries are merely, trying, like, I feel like there's always this narrative that communities of color around the world are like they're out here being the only refugees, and I spoke about this, where I'm just like, are these societies, in terms of Western societies, white societies, just trying to create an image for the Black and brown community as being helpless and needing to be saved and all this stuff? But I feel like and because of instability, we have to keep it real, because of the instability that has been caused in many Black and brown countries by Western powers and societies, they are naturally, they have other things to take into consideration. So yeah, so I find that can serve that can serve that can also cause communities of color to, you know, come to other societies and not be fully informed on their own history, on the reality of colonization, of like the impact of it is a better way to put it. And therefore, when they're voting or when they're making decisions, they're making decisions based off who is in power and who has more say in the world, right? Being that the white man, the white woman, they're just following whoever they deem to be, I guess, more acceptable to them. More, it's like subconsciously people don't realize how they think is rooted on a lot of what society has instilled in this world, like what they perceive. Oh, when it comes to like very even minute things, that like beauty, what they perceive, it's just because society has created this idea, or you know what, and who we should side with. It's like people don't take a moment to realize how it's all hinged on colonization, and therefore it's almost as if they've made that decision for you instead of allowing you to make the decision for yourself. So yeah, so I think there's so many things, and naturally I don't tackle all of that, but I will dive into what I wrote. There's been a lot of talk about why certain minorities, like Cubans, or like the Cuban community. I'm actually half Cuban, so I know I haven't mentioned that. I said I will share more on my heritage, so there's that. So like Cubans and even some in the Muslim community voted for Trump. The prevailing theory often points to racism and colorism, both of which are undeniably present within our communities, right? But I believe misogyny plays an equally significant role in this dynamic. Let's not forget how difficult it has already been for this country to elect a non-white male president, Obama. The level of obsession and backlash Trump and his supporters have shown towards him says a lot. Now imagine trying to get a woman into that same leadership role. The resistance is even greater. We often overlook how deeply religious the US still is. And religion, as we know, tends to reinforce rigid gender roles, or just gender roles. Many minorities come from highly religious or traditionally conservative cultures. I spoke about that a bit in my previous video. I say this with experience. I'm half Cuban, naturally, as I mentioned a few minutes a second ago. Maybe someday I'll talk more about my background, as that is part of my background. I remember a family member once explaining their political views to me. They shared this jumble of anti-communist sentiment, pointing to the Republican Party as the only real defense against it. Honestly, it reminded me of how back in the 1940s and 50s, as someone that grew up, like my parents, as you know now, were highly religious, they only allowed me to watch certain shows, movies, because they believed it was, how would I say it with, honestly, they thought it was more, it was innocent. It didn't show, that, and that's, I guess they perceived it as a better, like, I don't even know how to put it. How would you put that? Like, they didn't feel like a lot of the shows, movies, or things didn't have evil. Interesting, because if they delve into their lives and reality, if you know the lives of the celebrities back in the 1940s and 50s, you know those people did not have the same, or the life that they depicted. And I feel like this is America in essence. It's like they always they create a facade of who it is and who they are. The same for the West. they depict that so much in 1940s and 50s. I feel like that mirrors that very thing, where it's just like 1940s and 50s, they created this perception of being with one person, but yet they, you know, if you're a religious individual or someone that comes from religious backgrounds, I grew up in a religious background. That is what I was brought into Christianity, and not your typical, like, a lot of people believe Christianity is more liberal when you actually have conversation with people outside and from other religions, that they believe it's more like free and all. No, I grew up in a very, I don't know if anyone, if someone speaks Spanish, rajatabla, meaning that Christianity, the ones where you wore a certain dress code, where you had certain hair length, where you didn't wear makeup. Yeah, that's you couldn't, women don't wear pants, that kind of Christianity. So there's always this idealistic belief of like the past, once upon a time this was. Learn about the lives of these celebrities. Truly not very different from today. Probably even worse, because they all kept it hush hush. We don't even know what was happening in reality. Now there's actually accountability happening. But yeah, so often the progressive creative thinkers of that time, just like as I was mentioning, honestly, it reminded me of how back, so I guess I'll just read that sentence again, or that very paragraph. I remember a family member once explaining their political views to me. They shared this jumble of anti-communist sentiment, pointing to the Republican Party as the only real defense against it. Honestly, it reminded me of how back in the 1940s and 50s, certain celebrities, often the progressive and creative thinkers of that time, experienced backlash and were also publicly smeared as communists by the government, all because they dared to think outside the box. Think about that for a second. A government that claims to believe in freedom of speech, progress, and individual thought, yet actively punishes people for thinking differently. That's wild. But yeah, so I just want to leave you with that thought. But take care, everyone. Bye.